We're here at the Dead Zone, outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with Brian Stahl. It's a unique collection of pinball machines for a unique and pretty cool character. Brian, you ready to start this?
I'm ready. Welcome to the Dead Zone.
I don't think that could have gone better.
Looking at the caskets, and the guy running the auction comes up and he's like, I can tell you're pretty interested in these caskets. He's like, honestly, he's like, I don't think anybody else here is here to buy a casket. He's like, do you want to just like make an offer on one right now? I was like, I don't know, how about like $100? He's like, sold.
That seems like a great deal on a casket.
Yeah, he's like, done deal. You know, still like plastic wrap on it and everything.
Is this going to be your casket?
I don't know. It might be a little too beat up by the time I get there, but who knows? I could die next year or tomorrow.
I want to go out in a wooden box.
That's not a bad way to go.
Plain old pine box.
That's the environmental way to go.
Just box me up and throw me off a cliff. Is that a chicken hanging up?
That's a bat.
Oh, a bat.
Totally different from a chicken. That's a mammal.
Sorry, it just looks like bones and meat. You could fit one end sideways. At least you could get 2 wedge heads in here. And if you're talking about stacking wedge heads, this is a hell of a pinhauler.
Definitely, and you've got these rollers in the floor. I mean, you can slide it right out the back. You know, what I always wanted to do was actually have like a mobile gaming center out of this. Like have a machine that you could play right out of the back, like roll it out halfway and then be able to play it off the back bumper. I mean, that'd be awesome.
Papa has a minivan and we totally blew it.
You should have got a Hearse.
We should have got a Hearse.
It's not too late. You know, you could return the minivan.
You know, all right, so there's people out there who are like, that's a 57 Chevy. If you look at a Hearse, you're like, that's a 93.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially the Cadillacs, because I'm a Cadillac man. You know, I can definitely identify those. And the things with the Hearses, too, is not a lot of people know this is a Cadillac, but there's actually different body companies that made the Hearse part of it. So this is a 60 Cadillac, but there was actually 4 major companies that made the Hearse out of the Cadillac. So
really?
Yeah, you'll have totally different Hearses for 1960. You know, you could have, you know, and each of those companies had different models. So you could really have like 10 completely different 1960 Hearses parked next to each other.
This here whenever I came in, actually. It's this is kind of the bar piece that you only get at someone who has pinball machines. This isn't something that's at, you know, like, I'll say a normal person's house, because we're all that way. But
no, that's not a common decoration for sure.
Is this functioning, or
it is. I was just using it. This is like, it doubles as my bar and as my workbench.
Multi-purpose bar.
Absolutely.
Multi-purpose area.
Figured it was time to replace my batteries, and I had 2 of them I was meaning to replace the holders on, so...
I'm pro battery damage.
Really?
Yeah.
You're a proponent of battery damage?
Yeah, I think it makes games more interesting, because you never know what's going to happen.
That's
you know,
true. It is a big randomizer.
Coils may fire, they may not, you know, like... ROMs may work, they may not. Rules, sometimes stuff just does whatever it wants. You may get 1,000,000 points, you may not get any. That's actually what we're going to open up a battery acid division at Papa, where it's just going to be all like up games, and so people have to come up.
Sure. I mean, I'm a horror guy through and through. Horror, B movies, bad sci-fi.
Those are all pretty much
mind benders. You know,
you are from Pittsburgh, in
yes,
the area.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, the zombies definitely hold a special place in my heart, my home. I mean, I know they've kind of become a cliche thing these days, but I've been a fan of zombies since I can remember. You know, and a lot of my friends were always zombie fans, so you know, I definitely have a place in my heart for Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. You know, that the Monroeville Mall that they shot Dawn of the Dead in is not that far from here.
So I just watched Juan of the Dead, which takes place in Cuba. I'm totally serious.
Like a guy's name, Juan of the Dead.
Juan of the Dead. I recommend
That's a new one on me. It was good. It's worth a watch.
It's all in Spanish, but if you can get past that, it's cool.
I might be able to get past that.
My parents went to the drive-in and watched Night of the Living Dead, and they were in a convertible, and my dad couldn't care less. He was just trying to take my mom's top off. And she was scared out of her mind, you know, and like it was kind of cool because that movie being local to here with like Chili Billy Cardilli and all that stuff, it was, and you know, they were naming places that she had grown up. And she was around, and they're like, you know, go to your
Zelienople,
go to your fire hall, and blah blah blah. And you know, she's just watching this movie, losing her mind, and my dad's trying to kiss her, and like she ended up cutting the date off. It was almost the end of it.
Stay tuned to the broadcasting stations in your local area for this list of rescue stations. This list will be repeated throughout our news coverage.
Yeah, it must have been not that bad of a date. I mean, all things considered.
I'm pretty sure it was a terrible date, but
she got over it.
She got over it, yeah.
There's a big gap in my pinball story, actually. I mean, I got started when I was very young. My dad, one holiday season, bought a EM 1973 Gottlieb Big Shot. And at the time, this was in the mid-'80s, you know, I was like 7 years old or something along those lines. And at the time, you know, 8-bit Nintendo had just come out, and, you know, the kids were all interested in the consoles and the video games. And, I mean, we paid some attention to the pinball machine, but it was more like my dad's baby. It was like the big kid's toy, you know. His friends would come over and play games with them. And, you know, we were allowed to play, but it was more like, don't do that, you know. What are you doing? That's not how you play. You plunged my ball, you know, what are you doing? But, you know, we had it for a few years, and my dad had a lot of trouble, honestly, keeping it going. It worked great for a long time, but then, you know, problems started catching up to him, and he ended up kind of giving up on it after a few years, and it just kind of disappeared from sight and out of mind.
Every game's different, like every World Cup is going to feel different, and also every game's different, as you well know, the rules. Now, Rick is talking about very complex things. You do this, and you do this, and you do this, and that's another key part of pinball, is just knowing the rules of the game, especially these modern ones. They're very complicated. Now, I'll give you one example. During multi-ball, I said you got to shoot the ramp to light the goal again. After I'd been playing this game for 14 years, I was in a tournament, and I found out one time per multi-ball, if you actually hit this is the button that gets you an extra ball if you want to continue your game. If you hit that once after getting a goal per multi-ball, it'll relight the goal for you. I didn't learn that for 14 years. So and I've been playing in tournaments for 14 years at that point. There are a lot of complexities. I don't know, on Indiana Jones, a pinball machine a few years ago, I found out if you go in the mine cart, it's a video screen part of the game, this frog jumps out of the Ark of the Covenant. And this is a special little thing. There are a lot of rules. Some are silly, like the frog jumping out, but this one, hitting this button to relight the goal one time per multi-ball, it's a really interesting, you know, helpful thing to know. But there's so many rules, they're very complex. Rick knows them all. And you gotta, if you want to improve your scores, you gotta apply yourself to learning the rules. Or if you're just playing for fun, it's very personal, and that's the last thing I always emphasize. If you want to just shoot the shots that are fun, as long as they're flashing, as long as you're not hitting both flippers at the same time, shoot the shots that you like. Maybe they make a sound that you like, or you just like the feel.
Rising, and Judgment Day is upon us.
I ended up buying a machine off of a guy who was an operator, probably about 10 miles from here. And I didn't know he was an operator. I just bought a game he had on Craigslist or something, went out to take a look at it.
How long ago was this?
That was in 2006, so almost 8 years ago now. Right. And he was an operator that had closed out, and it was at his personal residence, and his whole house was absolutely crammed with arcade machines. His garage was full. His living room was full. I mean, just end-to-end arcade machines. So he was, you know, trying to make a deal, like, I need to get these things out of here. I'll sell them to you cheap. You know, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I was like, well, you know, let me think about it. I'm not, you know, loaded here.
Did you know what you were doing during that conversation?
No.
I'm just saying, because I remember the first time I was buying a game, I'm walking in and looking at stuff, you know, like picking up parts and looking underneath them, and like, oh, well, you know, your converter blah 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 is not looking good, and it's like I have no idea what I'm talking about, you know. It just
No, I didn't even know enough to pretend that I knew what I was talking about. I was that green. I mean, I really had next to no idea what I was getting into.
How much you charging? Here's an extra 50.
I just knew the prices looked good, you know, and if the thing turned on and seemed mostly working, that seemed good enough for me, you know. I was talking to my dad a short time later, and I told him what I was up to, like, oh, I bought these arcade machines. He's like, oh, you know, would you want that old pinball machine that we had back in the day? I was like, what? Do you still have that? He's like, yeah, I've still got it. It's just been sitting in the garage for, you know, 20 years untouched. He still had it. He still had it in storage. I didn't even know he still had it. I hadn't even thought about that machine in 20 years. I was like, okay, you know, yeah, I'll take it, sure.
Flawless condition.
Oh yeah, I worked like a champ on the first shot, no problem.
What luck.
I just got these arcade machines, and people were coming over to the house, and, you know, they'd play 1 or 2 games on the arcade machine, and then, like, there'd be 7 or 8 people gathered around this, you know, 30-year-old pinball machine playing that all night. And I was like, wow, you know, maybe I should look into getting another pinball machine. The game before I decided on the theme. John actually had helped me find the game, Gentleman John. He found it on Craigslist, I believe, for like $200 or thereabouts, and it needed a lot of work. The playfield was absolutely shot on it. About the only thing that was nice on it was the backglass. The backglass was nearly perfect.
So you hit it with a brick, right?
Yeah, so I smashed it into a million pieces. No, I sold that. But, you know, the plastics were all cracked. I mean, it was just a mess. A bunch of switch errors, acid damage on the CPU. I mean, you name it, it had it. John was like, I don't know if I even want this. Do you want it? And I was like, you know what, that could work for that custom idea I've been toying around with. Really, my wife kind of helped me solidify it, saying, you know, Ghostbusters would be great because of the upper playfield could be the top of the apartment building, you know, from the end of the movie. You've got the space for the ecto machine, and, you know, even on Flash Gordon, it's got kind of the green slime lane for the inline drop targets. Like, that could be great for a Slimer lane.
Little ectoplasm area.
Yeah, exactly. It just seemed like a natural fit for the layout of Flash Gordon. The playfield was the biggest obstacle as far as the design aspect is concerned. The artwork for the playfield.
Did you do the art yourself?
Not in the sense that I freehand drew it or anything like that. I just used what I knew about Photoshop to take existing art that had been made for anything Ghostbusters and created this scene out of the characters and the building and everything that I could find to fit this playfield layout, really.
Your game is so much more than just art. Whenever we were in the other room, I heard it talking to us, and it was given Ghostbusters clips.
Yes.
How did you get to this point?
I wanted to experiment with this device called the MP3 trigger, where basically it responds to a switch closure to trigger a sound. There's actually a separate switch matrix for the sound effects. I mean, it was very tedious, but it's very effective. Even on the workbench when I was first messing with it, that was really like the make it or break it point where I was like, okay, this seems like this is really gonna work. I'm gonna finish this project. You know, I'm gonna go through with this because I think this could be something a little extra special.
How long did it take you from conception to where you're at now?
I'd say about 14 months of work. You know, that's not constantly sitting there doing something, but some of it was just like waiting for things to get done. Cadillac Hearse, and because 77 was like the first downsized chassis for Cadillac, you know, GM had that mandated downsizing, so it was a little smaller, and I was like, wait, there's bigger ones? I gotta get a big one. So I ended up getting a 72, which was like huge.
So
I mean, gigantic car.
You upgraded your Hearse.
Yeah, I upgraded my Hearse a third time too, because this is my third Hearse. So I had that sucker, and I ended up getting involved with the Professional Car Society, which is like a car club dedicated to commercial passenger cars, like old ambulances, old hearses, limousines, flower cars. Which
Old
is
ambulance
like
would be sweet.
Dwell alone in a bar or laundromat, or offer its services in a pinball palace, squeezed in among row upon row of its flashing, ringing fellows. When you insert a quarter into the slot, a certain number of games will register on the credit display. depending on the extent of pinball price inflation in your area.
Now you see Rick holding the ball for a moment, and that's another reason to sometimes just hold up the flipper and catch the ball when you can. That gives you a chance to A, pause the ball and make it easier to hit your next shot. Instead of some ball just flying in and you just whacking it, having it trapped, as they say, is a good spot to A, get the ball under control, and B, I think Rick was looking like, what am I going to shoot next? It kind of looked like that, and so trapping the ball is helpful for that. What he's talking about is when you have the multi-ball, they'll be playing a multi-ball, holding two balls on one flipper maybe, or one ball on one flipper, and just flipping with the other, and so they've got one ball under control. Now they are a little handicapped where they can't flip that, but if they run into trouble, they might lose that ball that they are playing with, then they can flip and hopefully get another ball under control. But that's how these players play. If you want to check it out, the tournaments going in the back, you'll see a lot of that. They're actually projecting a live game on the screen.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Well, in time, would you say you ought to be able to wrap this up in 24 hours?
Well, we don't really know. We know we'll be into it most of the night, probably into the early morning.
I was always a fan of horror and B movies, so I knew I wanted to try to find a spooky pinball machine. And looking at the prices online, I remember, you know, looking at things like Twilight Zone and whatnot and being like, wow, I couldn't believe it. At the time, I think it was $2,500 was the average for a Twilight Zone. I was like, I'll never spend that kind of money on a pinball machine. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So I saw Clay Harrell, oddly enough, had a post, I think on RGP at the time, where he had a container come in, you know, a container from Europe. And he had a bunch of games that seemed like they were reasonably priced, and he had a Tales from the Crypt in there. And something clicked, and I had remembered playing Tales from the Crypt, you know, a long time ago, or at least seeing it, you know, remembered some things about it. I was like, wow, I remember that being kind of a neat game, and it seems like it might be within my budget.
I think it's the most gruesome opening animation of any like pinball plunge.
It is. It's you're chopping somebody's head off right off the bat.
I mean, where do you go from there?
You can't go anywhere from there. I mean, the game tries.
You're leading with the guillotine. You can't. It's difficult to follow that.
There's a few like the chainsaw when you get the jackpot on the regular multi-ball, cutting the zombie's head in half with the brains spilling out is pretty graphic. There's a few other things that try to top the intro sequence, but I mean, let's face it, that's probably the goriest pinball machine of all time. I mean, it's a little tongue-in-cheek.
Well done, Data East.
yeah. I mean, my hat's off to Data East for that. That was definitely a shining moment as far as them being willing to push the envelope in pinball. Well, to get the Tales from the Crypt, we had to drive out. You know, Clay lives in
Detroit.
Yeah, near Detroit, Michigan. So picked it up. Met Clay, which was pretty cool. Came back, and then, of course, that game was a huge hit. You know, everybody loved that. At that point, it kind of like turned the tide where I knew I was committed to pinball and was going to try to expand pinball.
When was the first time you started breaking out the tape measure?
To measure space? It wasn't that long after, because I actually remodeled my basement to fit more pins.
Did you do the ceiling to make sure you could like fold them up?
Well, the ceiling was already there. I mean, it was already at the height where I could unfold them. I knew that much, but the walls were a problem. There was a little office in the back there that I ended up knocking out two of the walls to make that big room in the center. Tales from the Crypt and Twilight Zone both ended up getting an upgrade at some point. I actually ended up finding really nice condition versions of those two.
So you went from looking at the price on a Twilight Zone and thinking never,
yeah, exactly,
to saying I already have a Twilight Zone, I want a better one.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, you know, for a little bit more I can upgrade. No, I got a really good deal on both of them, so it was almost like a too good to pass up type of thing. It was like, do you want this perfect Twilight Zone at this price? I was like, I'd be a fool not to buy that, even though I already have one, so I'll sell my other one and fix this one. This is Mystery Castle. It's a 1993 Alvin G. Alvin G did not make a lot of pinball machines. I think they only made 3 standard pinball machines.
And what does the G stand for?
The G stands for Gottlieb. It's actually Alvin Gottlieb. The Gottlieb family had kind of got out of the pinball business, and then in the early 90s decided they were going to jump back in, but they had sold the Gottlieb pinball name, and this is just as best I understand it. So when they decided to get back in, they had to use a different name, and they went with Alvin G after Alvin Gottlieb.
Where'd you get a Mystery Castle? Because I gotta be honest, I'm sitting here staring at this and I'm pretty angry because I've been trying to find one of these for years for the Papa facility and I can't.
They are not easy to find, I'll tell you. I was looking for one for probably about 3 years when I found this, and believe it or not, it's the pin I had to drive the shortest distance to get. Yeah, a guy up just north of Cranberry here, which is like 20 minutes from my house, had one. Mystery Castle is actually a pretty deep game. It's a mode-based game. There's the items for the scavenger hunt. Basically, it's a scavenger hunt in a spooky old castle, and you have to collect all of the items to get to the wizard mode, and each item that you collect is its own either scoring enhancement or mode or multi-ball. And then there's also a standard multi-ball that you can start, and you can stack all the modes and you can stack all the multi-balls. I mean, it's a pretty involved game for how low production it is. As far as we can tell, it looks like they made just over 200 units.
Did you know about Mystery Castle before you went to buy it, or did you buy it? Okay.
Yeah, I'd actually played it at a local retailer. I mean, it was amazing that they had it. At the time, I didn't know it was rare, but of course I was interested in the horror game, so I played the heck out of it.
Everyone around here has one.
Oh, yeah. And I was actually disheartened when I found out how rare it was. You know, I was like, that game's great, I gotta find that. And then I was like, oh, I'm not gonna find that.
As the ball is coming down to the flipper, what they'll do is flip the flipper just as the ball is going to hit the point that the flipper stops at. So again, ball coming down and hit the flipper just at the point the flipper stops at. And you have to time this perfectly, and what will happen if you've done it correctly, there's quite a few guys, again, if you watch the tournament on the screen, who will do this, like Kaylee in particular is well known for it. The ball will stop on the flipper. So remember, the ball's coming in, maybe at a high speed, but if you time this perfectly, the ball meets the flipper and stops dead.
It's the physical nature of it. I mean, how many games do you really have that physical interaction anymore? It seems like everything's on a screen or it's video, and it's also about the art and the sounds and the feel of the machine and all the different aspects of the hobby, from repair to the skills of advanced tournament players. You know, the artists and the, you know, you can just stand there and look at a pinball machine and be in amazement and have a good time. There's so many ways you can enjoy this hobby, really, aside from, you know, just playing pinball. I mean, of course, that's the meat of it, but there's just something for so many different people in this hobby, I think.
Thank you so much for letting us into the Dead Zone.
Thank you, Mark. My pleasure. Thanks for coming out. You can take her home with you. She seems to like you.
I don't think Anastasia would like that too much.
They can fight it out.